Welcome to This Just In, the show bringing you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and public policy. And now, for the fastest voice in healthcare, here's your host, Justin Barnes.
Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to This Just In. I'm your host, Justin Barnes. In these episodes, I bring you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and public policy. As always, we're broadcasting from the This Just In studios on the Business Radio X network, as well as a Healthcare Now radio network, and my new network, the Health Podcast Network. I could not be more excited for this show, my 350th episode. And I don't have one, but two of my show's most frequent guests back to launch their new masterpiece, their latest masterpiece, Transform. Welcome back to the show, John Halamka and Paul Cerrato. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Always exciting to chat with you. So really look forward to the discussion.
Same here. I enjoy it as well. So first of all, Paul, where are you calling in from today?
I'm about an hour north of New York City in a town called Warwick, New York.
Excellent, excellent. What's the weather like? Beautiful?
It's a little rainy, kind of rainy.
Okay. And John, Dr. Halamka, where are you calling in from?
I am in Unity Farm Sanctuary in Sherborne, Massachusetts. But people ask, do I live in Massachusetts? The answer is I live in the Delta Lounge. With over 500,000 miles of travel, I am wherever my laptop is.
Exactly. I love it. So I get you brought it up. I love it. I'm a big fan supporter of Unity Farm Sanctuary. So give us the latest update on that before we dive into the book, all the great stuff with this amazing book. And I love it. And I got some really cool points to share there as well. But yeah, tell us about the farm, please.
So Paul and I, of course, live in a world of technology where everything is accelerating and change is constant. But yet I live at an animal sanctuary where change is gradual. The animals' lives are measured in the seasons. And so yesterday was shearing day. So what does that mean? It means the alpaca and the sheep look like Dr. Seuss animals. And of course, it's been a very wet spring. Mm-hmm. And so you go from winter to mud season. But it's always generally predictable. And at the moment, all are happy and healthy.
And how many animals again do you have there?
Just north of 400.
I mean, it's growing. Last I remember, I think it was just like 170 or 180, but I don't know. Maybe I could be. Wow. Congrats. You guys and Kathy do phenomenal work. Paul, what's your passion? What's your latest passion?
My latest passion, actually, it's been a passion for about 40 years, is music.
Yep.
So I wear three hats in the world. I'm a senior researcher from Mayo Clinic, and I'm a professor at Northeastern University where I teach a course on AI. Mm-hmm. But then in my free time, I run a recording studio. So that means bringing in musicians and singers and songwriters. So I play a few instruments and we record some cover music and some original music, and then we put it on the web.
Love it. Congrats. Yeah, I remember that now. I was trying to think back today. I know you've launched several of your books on my show, which I'm always grateful for. But is this your fifth or sixth book? Seventh book.
Number seven.
Seventh book. Wow. Because I think I went back to my notes. Was it 2017 was your first one, or am I missing one? Or
that sounds about right.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's 16th for me. But remember, I have been writing since I was 17 years old. And you can still find some of these old classics, on Amazon.
There you go. I know. I actually went through. It's kind of cool just going through all my notes from even the very first episode that we did in your very first book. So I'm always grateful and grateful for it. So before we dive in, and set the stage, what was the greatest aspect or the most fun piece about writing these books, and certainly this book, but all the books? Like, what do you think about? So I guess Paul is one of the initial authors here. What's one of the most fun aspects about writing this book, or what do you think changes the most out there from this book?
I guess the fact that the challenge is to take complex material that very often only a data scientist will understand and translate it into plain English, and that's although it's a challenge, it's a lot of fun. And as I dig into it and I learn some of these complex ideas, it's a form of education. So it's like I'm constantly learning year after year, perpetual student, so to speak.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, just, some thoughts. All of us do our best every day to have an impact. But what you write is something you leave behind. And isn't it interesting, Paul, you and I lecture all over the world. I think people's memories are short, and a year or two go by, they won't remember what you said or where you said it. But if you wrote something, that will be something that will last for decades.
And I still get responses to the books that I've written over the years. So yeah, it has a long shelf life.
Yeah, and I think, and to your point, Paul, which you brought up around simplifying extremely complex topics, that's exactly the kind of strategy that I would bring to Capitol Hill, and John, you did certainly as well, is try to make these very complex issues understandable to just the average staffer and the average congressional member or senator and whomever, or president for that matter. So, and you certainly do that, because actually, when I was reviewing the book today before we came on air, and just how some of these topics you have made very simple for the average person to understand. This is not written for the healthcare insider per se. This is actually written for anybody who could pick up this book as a consumer of healthcare and truly understand most of it. And also not just understand, but learn so much. I mean, I've been doing this now a long time as well, I guess 30 something years. And I think I have my finger in the pulse of a lot of stuff, but every time I engage one of your books, I learned a lot more. And I love that. That's kind of why I love living so well, is just because I get to learn every day. So your book brings it up. And even the personal aspect, John, of how you, and I know you mentioned this before, but how, Kathy's, her personal cancer journey that she went through. And that's when I kind of thought about that question, what's the greatest impact from this book? Because, I mean, you're going to save millions of lives. I mean, with this type of book, but also educating this about the innovation that you're working on with Mayo and so forth. I mean, that's kind of what came to my head, but what are your thoughts there?
So, I'm an apolitical person, always been bipartisan.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so if you look at the New York Times this morning, there is an interesting article on populations and the future of the human race given low fertility rates. And the interesting question we all have is, if we are going to need healthcare, who is going to be there to deliver it?
Right.
And so as you look to the future where we're having longer lives, but there are fewer young doctors and nurses to care for us, it is imperative that we use automation so that those professionals we have practice the top of their license. And really much of the book is asking that question.
Yeah.
How do we augment humans so they can deliver more care to more people in more locations?
Amen. Amen. Love that. So kind of, diving in here, tell us about the Mayo Clinic platform. You kind of created that. I mean, was that about 8 years ago, or how long ago was that, John?
Yeah. So Paul, isn't it amazing how time flies?
Oh no, am I way off?
January 1, 2020.
Oh,
Just
okay. Just 5 years
5
ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Right.
okay.
And so the idea was straightforward, which was, if we are going to, as a society, leverage the privacy protected data of patients of the past,
Mm-hmm.
we better have a standard approach, not an ad hoc approach, so that we can bring in innovators, global innovators, large and small. We can find adopters, and those may be rural. Those may be those without ability to develop AI on their own, or they could be academic medical centers. They could be pharma organizations. And so curate the world's data, bring together the world's innovators, and disseminate it to get adoption with the ultimate impact of touching 4 billion people. So, as you say, it's been a 5-year journey so far.
It's excellent. Love it. And Paul, you joined, my timing and time does fly, but about 2 years ago or so. When did you join?
Well, that was 4 years.
You joined 4 years ago.
Yeah, 4 years.
All right, I'm gonna stop with my guessing of my time frames. I've known John for so long. I did come across a picture of you and I, John, on stage. I think it was 2010. I just found it the other day. It's kind of cool. From we're at a White House, one of the I think it was in the White House or briefing center or something like that. But anyhow, I've known, John a long time, so time certainly does fly.
Yeah.
And then for those that may tuned in a little late, my special guests today are Dr. John Halamka and Mr. Paul Cerrato, and we are discussing the new masterpiece, Transform, their 7th book together. Did I get that right at least, finally? Excellent. So segment, talking about the book and how you guys parse it out. Chapter 1 starts with building the network. And so what network, why is this pivotal in reinventing healthcare?
So the network we refer to as Connect, Mayo Clinic Platform Connect. And basically it's a gigantic data set that includes tens of millions of patient records from Mayo Clinic and from hospitals around the world, basically. So the question is, why do you need this data set and what value does it have? There's so many hidden gems within the patient records that we have access to. And with the right kinds of AI, you can find patterns that normally you would not find. So the example that came to mind is take something like pancreatic cancer. So that's one of the most deadly cancers because it is usually detected very late. And so the survival rate is very small. So let's say, for argument's sake, that you dive into this Connect network and you find that a very large percentage of patients who have pancreatic cancer also have elevated hemoglobin levels, just pulling this out. So that gives you a clue as perhaps there is some link between elevated hemoglobin levels and pancreatic cancer. Could this be used as an early detection tool? So there are hundreds of thousands of different possible biomarkers that we might be able to pull out of Connect in order to improve patient diagnosis and patient treatment.
And so, Justin, since you and I have been doing this for so long, together, you know that in the journey from that White House briefing in 2010, some has been technology evolution, some has been policy change, but a lot of it is psychology. Who will share what data and how will they protect privacy and reputation and intellectual property? So as Paul has said, so much of that first chapter is, so how do you go about the psychology problem? That's probably the hardest piece.
Right. Very true. I mean, can you ballpark how many data points you guys have access to or you integrate in over an annual basis or over the time frame you've been building in the last 5 years? Do you have
Well, the number is 56 million patients birth to death, but the number of data points is multiple billions.
Yeah. Wow. So just think with that network, it's truly building. That's phenomenal. So as follow up, so since, and I mentioned this early on, since your primary audience is consumer, how is this book different than the last 6 books that you've written together? Paul?
So the last 6 books have been primarily for physicians and for technologists. So we're using different language. So folks who have an interest in healthcare but are not specializing in it could understand it. And one of the concepts that we try to explain is something called a artificial neural network, which is even hard for professionals to understand, but with the right graphics and the right simple language, we can explain it.
Do you want me to pull up that graphic?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Let's give it a shot.
This is one of the images that we use in the book. And as I said, it's to explain what an artificial neural network is. So to start with, an ANN is kind of like the brain's network of neurons. So a nerve cell has a tentacle going into it and one coming out of it, and it sends information along a path. Similarly, the neural network that we're looking at here has a similar function. So the input in this case would be a bunch of images from patients. So some of these images are of normal moles and some of them are of melanomas. So what the neural network is capable of doing is parsing out those that are dangerous from those that are not. So it goes through a series of steps. So initially, it might look at the edges of a mole, and the edges of a normal mole are round, whereas the edges of a melanoma are jagged. So the network would pull that fact out, and then on the next layer, it might look for other markers of disease. So a melanoma might be bleeding as opposed to a mole, which is not. So it goes through a series of steps looking for features in the images that are unique to a melanoma versus a normal mole. And then because the process is imperfect, there's a process called back propagation, which looks backwards to find its mistakes, and it goes back and forth until it gets very close to being accurate. And it's now being used by physicians and the public to help pinpoint skin cancer.
Mm-hmm. Love it. It's excellent. Excellent. Anything you want to add to that, John?
Well, and remember, I mean, as Paul's described it, this is math, not magic.
Yeah.
People say, oh, well, is this AI sentient? Is it making decisions? Is it thinking? And we've heard from Paul that imagine you take 100 million images of skin cancer, and there are going to be those that are single color and multicolored, those that are smooth and those that are rough, those that bleed and not bleed. The mathematical models created by AI exceed human capacity to compute. I can only compute 5 separate variables and keep them in my head. But hey, an algorithm could do hundreds and it would not even skip a beat. So it may be able to actually recognize features of the skin cancer that a human can't perceive because it's simply looking at math in the image. And that's why it's so important to do this as an augmentation to human experience and decision making.
Yep. I love it. That's exactly what we want people to start to really understand about AI and the opportunity that it brings to us, probably in almost every aspect of our life. What is the purpose of tech stops throughout the book?
So although our main audience are consumers and patients, we also, our secondary audience are professionals. We didn't want to ignore them.
Love it.
Tech stops are deeper dives into the various subjects so that the book appeals to both audiences.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And I know not part of the book, but a recent announcement talking about technology is you have a new person leading AI joining you guys, correct, John? Is that Mickey Tripathi?
Yeah, so Mickey, who was the national coordinator and the assistant secretary of health for the Biden administration, on May 1st joined Mayo Clinic as our chief AI implementation officer. And you may ask, well, what does that really mean? There is a huge gap in society between the math, that is the finished algorithm developed in the lab, and it actually being used in the examination room. It actually being used to help clinical decision making. And so his role is to look across all of Mayo, platform, Center for Digital Health, information technology, our generative AI projects and digital pathology, find the treasures, as you've heard Paul describe, and make sure that they are adopted for their greatest impact while also minimizing harm.
Love it. Yeah. Mickey's a long-time leader in the industry as well. Been in the trenches for 25, 30 years, or if not longer. So no, that's a great win for Mayo. Great win. I'm sure you love working with him again, because you guys kind of cross paths a lot throughout the decades. So
remember, we were born on the same day.
I didn't know that, actually. I don't think I knew that. That's pretty cool.
When you see Mickey and I together, it's clear we were separated at birth.
It's so cool. Very cool. I was happy. I was very, very happy to read that. So congrats again. Moving on a little bit, and you guys bring this up a lot in the book, is this Coalition for Health AI. Let's use this for a couple of minutes here. So what exactly is CHI, or Coalition for Health AI, and what's its main function?
John,
Go ahead, Paul.
Yep.
You describe it, and then I'm going to add something to it.
There you go.
You've got it.
Love it.
So imagine that, and I'll use an analogy. You go to the supermarket and there's a can of soup. But the soup doesn't tell you what's inside, doesn't tell you how much fat or sodium. Would you buy the soup? Well, probably you'd want a little more information. And so here's the challenge. When you buy an AI algorithm today, it's like buying a soup can with no label.
That's right.
And so the idea 4 years ago, as you say, time flies. 8 organizations came together and said, let's develop the soup label for AI, a so-called data card and model card. What are the ingredients? But then how do those ingredients come together and how does it perform? Today, there are nearly 4,000 organizations in the Coalition for Health AI working on guidelines and guardrails, best practices, how to both look at novel products, but how to monitor them once they're in the marketplace, just as you would a drug.
Yeah.
So that's a good segue into what I wanted to mention, which is an example of algorithms gone wrong that don't use all these guidelines that John was speaking about. A couple of years ago, Epic, which is a large EHR vendor, came out with a sepsis model, which was supposed to help detect sepsis in its early stages. And according to the published research, it fell short. It did not detect the disease very early. So the question is, why not? And one of the reasons is because of something called data shift. So over time, the population that was used to create this algorithm started to change. There was changes in the ICD-9 and ICD-10 coding. Then there was COVID. And with all these changes, the algorithm was no longer up to snuff. So it's things like this that encouraged the coalition to promote assurance labs, where we actually get very, very solid evidence that a specific algorithm will work in the trenches, so to speak.
Yeah, and I love it. Thank you both. And when John first brought it up to me, I put my hat in the ring and I joined one of the work groups, and it is a phenomenal mix of, thought leaders and people feet on the street. And obviously there's vendors in there and a lot of clinicians, scientists, experts from all different walks of life. So you guys are a great coalition, a true coalition that has been built. So phenomenal work and well done there. In the closing couple of minutes here, I want to close with exactly where people can find this book, Transform. But also, before we get there, I would love to kind of look into the proverbial crystal ball a little bit and get each of your perspectives, maybe 90 seconds each or so. What are you guys most excited about over the next couple of years in healthcare? So, Paul, I'll start with you.
I'm really excited about generative AI and large language models. Right now, it's very much a mixed bag, with things like ChatGPT offering brilliant insights as well as disastrous hallucinations.
Right.
So with the right guidelines and with enough good research, eventually we'll be getting tools that truly help physicians and nurse practitioners to improve diagnosis and treatment. It's just a matter of time.
Yep.
And I would add, I've told you this before, Justin, that 50% of everything I was taught in medical school was wrong. I just don't know which 50%.
Yeah.
And the hope is that AI, predictive and generative, will be able to look at the latest evidence, the patient longitudinal experience, be able to bring me up-to-date information to help me deliver the best possible care to the patient. It was not something that was to human scale because there are 800 papers written in my field every day. I'm a little behind in my reading. I look forward to having a tool I use every day that truly improves the quality and the patient experience in every interaction that I have.
Love it. Well said. So, Paul and John, where can the listeners find the book, buy the book, and also follow your work?
So the book is available on Amazon. I'm sure there are several other websites where they can find it, but Amazon is probably the place where most people would go. And I was told the other day by the publisher that it became the number one new offering for a health policy. So
Love it.
that was kind of cool.
I've no doubt.
And Paul and I, we are writing every day. We are speaking every day. Certainly if you go to Mayo Clinic Platform.org, you will see some of the latest work we're doing together there.
Excellent. What's the next conference you're going to, John? Do you know?
Well, let's see. It's the end of May. So Mayo Clinic runs the largest innovation conference each year called Platform Ed.
Yeah.
And Platform Ed is in Minneapolis, June 3rd through 4th. So that is the next one. Then to be followed by Health Europe and many other opportunities to come.
Before we dive into this amazing book, and I'm going to brag on it a little bit, but I love Unity Farm Sanctuary. I never have my dates right because timing is, life is fantastic, but timing just goes by so fast. How long have you had Unity Farm Sanctuary, John?
And so we started in 2012, and it really has two major events in history. When my wife was diagnosed with stage 3A breast cancer, she wanted to leave something behind. And so that was the impetus for putting the organization together. But then 2016 was the date where the very large animals started to arrive. And of course, 3,000-pound Dudley, Spanish Highland Bull, celebrates his 10th birthday on June 7th.
He is beautiful. So I will tell everybody, check out Unity Farm Sanctuary. Look for Dudley specifically because he's a beautiful animal. But obviously all the amazing animals. And if I have my numbers right, 400, John, over 400?
Correct.
Okay, fantastic. Excellent. And Paul, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up your illustrious music career. And you said 40 years you've been doing your recording? How long have you been doing your recording?
Well, I've been running the studio for about 20 years. I've been
20
a
years.
musician for about 40 years.
That's it. Love it. Excellent. Transform, your new book. Thank you for using my platform to launch it again. You guys are on your 7th book. I think you've launched at least 5 on my platform, if not all of them. So exciting time as always. What was the most fun about this book? And then also, why this book? Why now? So I'll start off with you, Paul.
Well, as far as fun, it's fun to take hard ideas and convert them into plain English. Fun, it's a challenge, but it's a learning experience. And as far as why now, AI is in the news like it's never been before. Ever since ChatGPT exploded on the scene, it's like every business, small, large, every government facility is getting into AI. So there really is a need for the public to understand at a much deeper level what AI is capable of and what harm it can do.
Amen. It's excellent.
Well, Paul, shouldn't it be the right thing to do that we ask generative AI that question to see what it tells us the response is?
There you go.
And I just did it, of course. While people recognize the potential benefits of AI, there's significant ambivalence and skepticism about its use. Studies show the majority of people are concerned about risks outweighing potential benefits. And that's why now, because we need to show the public with guidelines and guardrails, there are benefits to be had.
Excellent point. And yeah, I mean, Paul, you made me think of this too, is I use AI at every turn in running my companies and certainly me personally, my personal life, but also business. I can't even fathom not using some type of AI tool to help me optimize my time, strategy, process, everything. And that's just for me as a simple business owner and stuff like that, but never mind providing the most optimized care and at scale too, John, to your point, global scale, the most efficient and effective healthcare. So,
and sometimes it's much faster than doing a Google search, and it's faster than using a user manual. So, how can you resist?
It is, but I asked ChatGPT how many books you guys have written, and it said at least 4 or 5, so it was wrong.
That's the other problem. It's never up to date.
Yeah. It was, I was not happy with it when it gave me that bad information, but anyhow, so use it. Yes. But to John's point, we're getting there, and that's why now. So, I guess now diving into the technology piece, what are some of the AI fueled algorithm solutions that the Mayo Clinic platform and your partners are developing?
For me, one of the most impressive developments is the use of neural networks to help diagnose colorectal cancer.
Mm-hmm.
This is the research is overwhelmingly positive. Algorithms are being used by Mayo Clinic gastroenterologists to increase the number of tiny polyps that are detected, and sometimes human endoscopists miss these things. So with the right algorithms, they're increasing the rate of detection. So that's one of many.
And Paul, that's such a salient example. When I was at Yale giving a lecture earlier in the week, one of my close colleagues told me that she's a 40-ish-year-old person who has a very significant history of being an athlete of world-class nature and a great diet, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer.
Mm.
So why should a 40-year-old woman who's an athlete with a great diet be diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer? One hopes the algorithms that look at liquid biopsies, that is, the cells in the blood, the images that we get, the endoscopy or colonoscopy, would prevent stage 4 colon cancer diagnosis, finding it at stage 0, or
Yeah.
predicting it before it happens.
It's a great point. What's the footprint of Mayo Clinic? 'Cause I have not read up on that recently. I mean, because I'm in Sarasota here in Florida. I know you guys are in the Jacksonville area, I believe, at least. But where is it? What's the footprint of Mayo Clinic?
Well, so many ways to say footprint. So understand that Mayo Clinic has been around over 150 years. It has destination medical centers in Minnesota, Florida, and Arizona.
Okay.
It has about 83,000 employees. But Mayo is just different than most organizations because it is very concerned about putting the patient first.
Mhm.
And so, yes, it does research. Yes, it does education, but it's well known for bringing together specialists on a single team to address the complete needs of the patient.
I love it. Excellent. So, the Mayo Clinic platform has a tool called Validate. What is its purpose?
So once again, we get back to the issue of a lot of poorly vetted algorithms have surfaced. Some of them are being used by clinicians without enough validation. So
Mm-hmm.
we created a tool called Validate.
Yep.
And essentially, it's a statistical analysis of these algorithms to detect bias, to look for specificity, sensitivity, areas under the curve, all these various statistical tools to help validate and to help developers create a model that is truly trustworthy and truly accurate.
Well,
Sounds
so just as a general comment, I talked about soup and the idea that you would want to look at the ingredients of soup, you'd want to look at a nutrition label. So in AI, we look at some of these algorithms mathematically, as Paul has described, and that starts with enumerating the data that went into it, the
Mhm.
ingredients. But to understand if that soup is delicious or not, it needs to be tasted.
Yeah.
And the validation process looks beyond just the data that was used to create an algorithm, but looks at its performance in the real world.
Yep. And the first person ever to bring up AI bias was you, John. This is in my think tank in 2019, right before COVID. We knew before COVID, quote unquote, hit, but I that think tank November of 19. And you brought up AI bias. That's the very first time I ever heard it. It made a lot of sense. So, I mean, I think Validate is probably one of your babies. Is that true, John? That
Well,
concept?
remember, everything we do at Mayo is bringing together teams of experts. And I think just the recognition was that in a life cycle that starts with data, produces an algorithm, requires validation of the algorithm, deployment and ongoing monitoring, that piece to validate was missing.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. You also have a program called Deploy. What is that about? I love this best practice. So yeah, tell us about that.
John?
Of course. So I have been working in this industry for 40 years. And I think you could say, Justin, that Electronic health record vendors create products that are fit for purpose, help with regulatory compliance, but they aren't necessarily so easy to enhance and modify and integrate with.
Right. Yeah.
And so Deploy's idea is, can you, for any electronic health record, put a sidecar next to the electronic health record, and in the context of a patient and a user, provide AI enhancement, describing to the clinician, oh, consider this test, consider that diagnosis.
Yep.
And oh, here's some literature you might find useful. And so Deploy is that sidecar. And it is EHR neutral, and it gives us a capacity to integrate into your workflow without requiring approval of any EHR vendor.
And this is available only within Mayo Clinic, or is this the best practice that you're going to share outside of Mayo Clinic, or how does that work? I love it.
So remember that what Mayo Clinic Platform does is it assembles collaborators around the world. It assembles tool sets. And so this is one of our offerings, one of our programs. So it is available globally.
Love that. Love that. So generative AI, we've talked about that here. Predictive AI and generative AI, large language models, ChatGPT, all of the news. Explain, I guess, to the layman's person, this is what your book does really, really well. That's why I want to kind of call this out now. Explain the potential risks and benefits of these to us as as consumers, innovators, but as a society. And again, your book does a great job of really simplifying these complex strategies and complex terms for everyone. So yeah, but let's take a moment now. So I guess, John, why don't you start off here?
Right. Well, so Mayo, just to give you an example, receives 12 million pages of PDFs every year, mostly from patients referred, a lot of international patients.
Mm-hmm.
Humans really can't read 12 million pages of PDFs so easily, but a generative AI can read the 12 million pages, summarize it, put it into a standard format, and inform the doctor and nurse what are the major issues with this patient you're about to see.
Yeah. Love that. Yep. Paul, what would you like to, anything else you mentioned about generative AI and large language models and ChatGPT?
Sometimes it's been compared to a Siri on steroids or Alexa on steroids. So it can generate very, very impressive human-like text. So impressive that some people forget that it's a machine and it's not a human being. So there's a couple of books out in which it's been used by physicians to detect rare genetic disorders. One particular pediatric endocrinologist that we talk about was able to diagnose a rare genetic disorder with the help of ChatGPT. And he readily admits that the vast majority of physicians would not have made that diagnosis without ChatGPT, which in itself is pretty impressive. But on the other hand, there's the fact that ChatGPT uses as its data set the entire internet, and the entire internet is filled with gems as well as garbage.
Yeah.
So there's always that possibility of hallucinations, and it has happened often. So one of the solutions is to create a large language model that uses a better data set. So a data set that's composed of all PubMed research, or New England Journal of Medicine articles and JAMA articles and so on. Because it's a more reliable source of information, you're less likely to get bizarre answers from it. So that's the direction that we're going in Mayo Clinic, and several other vendors, like Open Evidence is another group that we've been working with to create a specialized large language model that would give us more reliable information.
And this is not, first of all, it's a great, thank you for describing it like that. Cause I mean, this is not for just you or just Mayo Clinic or even large companies. I actually use LLMs in my company, in my business, even in my small business, based on the client or the situation, I use LLMs for each one, because to your exact point, I can make those expert sources, which then give you really credible, reliable data Everybody can use large language models or LLMs. So just as a side note for my audience, and thank you, Paul, for so eloquently stating that.
One last thing that I did want to mention about them. If you have to use a generic large language model like ChatGPT, you also need to do what's sometimes referred to as prompt engineering, which is asking questions after you ask the first question. So, for instance, I might ask, what's the value of intermittent fasting in weight loss? And it'll create a bunch of answers. But then I'll ask, are these answers from peer-reviewed medical journals? And sometimes it'll say, oops, they're not.
Right.
And then I'll say, okay, well, I only want those answers. And then you continue to refine your prompts so that you get closer and closer to the real truth.
It's a great way to use AI and certainly ChatGPT. And so for our listeners, because my team does that prompt response, and it works really, really well. So, and kind of following this path, what are some of the essential guardrails, in your opinion, for responsibly deploying AI in healthcare in America, as well as globally? I guess, John, I know you speak to that.
So imagine there is an algorithm that works really well to diagnose or predict cardiac disease, and it works for people with a body mass index below 31. It really doesn't work so well with those with a body mass index above 35. Is it ethical to use? Well, yes, if your patient has a body mass index below 31.
Right.
So the problem is that as we've been talking about validation and qualification, it's going to give us a context for where this particular algorithm will do wonders and where it potentially could do harm, so that it's only used in that right circumstance.
It's excellent. Excellent. Anything you'd add on to that, Paul?
No, that sums it up nicely.
Perfect. And for those that may tuned in a little late, my special guests today are Dr. John Halamka and Mr. Paul Cerrato, and we're discussing their new masterpiece, Transform, their 7th book together. So kind of moving into the next segment here, how does personalized genomics, the revolution, fit into the future of digital health? I mean, because we've heard a lot about this, and now we're mixing personalized genomics into AI and generative AI at some point. So, where's the future here, John?
So you may remember that I was the second human sequenced in the Personal Genome Project, and so I know my 3 billion base pairs, which are probabilistic, not deterministic. It tells you what diseases I might develop.
Yep.
Well, there is a concern when you look at my genome that prostate cancer, virulent prostate cancer, is a risk for me. But I'm a vegan with no family history of heart disease and no genetic proclivity for heart disease. So if I go to a primary caregiver, why should they do an EKG? Why should they measure my cholesterol? They should measure my PSA, right? And so that's what I think we're going to see AI help with, is looking at the corpus of who you are, your phenotype, your genome, and the way you live, what you eat, and that kind of thing, and then help figure out the right care journey for you.
Excellent. Excellent. Anything you want to add to that, Paul?
Yeah, one of the most impressive things in my mind about the genomics revolution and how it can personalize care is an area called pharmacogenomics.
Sure.
So right now we know that certain drugs are bad news for people who have a particular genetic profile. So it makes sense to do this type of genomic profiling so that patients with the risk are not given that drug, basically. We're not at the point yet where pharmacogenomic testing is universally available, but I think eventually we need to get there.
Absolutely. And kind of following this train of thought on, social determinants of health, how does that fit into this conversation? I mean, I guess SDOH has been around for a long time, but we're really starting to make some demonstrable advances, in my opinion. But how does this all fit together in health IT and digital health with AI?
Well, let me just start with 2 observations. So the first is that if you create an AI model, and let's imagine it is those people who can travel those people who have education or income, you may create a model that is so biased that if you change the social determinants of health, it will not be effective.
Right.
So what Mayo has tried to do in its development of models is it records some 40 different social determinants of health that we infer from the address you live at. We know a bit about where are the grocery stores, what's the access to primary care, what are the crime statistics. And so in that way, the models become much better performing. But the caveat would be self-report of social determinants of health is not always great. We have to be very careful about the data that we use. If it's 3 a.m. on a Sunday and you have abdominal pain and somebody is asking you, so Justin, do you consider yourself Hispanic? Well, my bet is the answer isn't going to be so great. You just want to get into the emergency room.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Very true. Your thoughts, Paul? Anything you're going to add to that?
I was making a list of all the different social determinants of health that are relevant. Economic stability, obviously, what kind of educational access you have, what level of education you've had, what's your community context. Are you living in what's sometimes referred to as a food desert, where there's virtually no fresh fruits and vegetables available? And those social determinants of health clearly have had an impact in the United States, in different parts of the United States. One of the statistics that we mentioned in the book is the average person in Mississippi will not make it past the age of 72.
Right.
If they lived in Bangladesh, the average lifespan would be 72. What's wrong with those numbers? This is supposed to be one of the richest nations in the world.
Right.
Life expectancy in Alabama, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Louisiana is less than 74. But if you live in Japan, Australia, or South Korea, you're typically going to live to 84 or beyond. Clearly, social determinants of health are a major issue to deal with.
Very, very true. And the Centurion, I think, yeah, the largest, well, the blue zones. I remember actually talking to John about blue zones back in the day as well, and Centurions and all that good stuff. But I completely agree. In the last couple of minutes here, maybe 60 seconds each, I always love to begin to end on a very positive note. So looking into the crystal ball, start off with you, Paul. What are you most excited about over the next couple of years in healthcare?
Well, once again, it's about generative AI, although it can be disastrous in some respects. I've been following this field for the last couple of years. Initially, you would see kind of wishy-washy studies where they did a retrospective analysis to suggest that a large language model would work. But over the last couple of years, I've been seeing better quality studies, prospective studies, randomized controlled studies. This is the kind of gold standards that are needed in order to convince the world, especially healthcare professionals, that these tools are ready to use. So that's what I see as being in the near future.
Love it. John?
Well, having done this for 4 decades, we've had challenges with data availability and data quality, compute power availability, tool sets. We are now at a stage where the data is good enough. The data is global. The tools are good enough, and the compute is nearly infinite. So I think 2025 and beyond is going to be truly a golden age for innovation of predictive and generative AI.
I love it. Very well said. Paul, where can listeners find this book? First of all, I want to take a second. This book was written, this was a consumer-facing book where a lot of your other books have been written for professionals, certainly on the inside of healthcare and providers. But this book was written towards a consumer-facing audience, and it's written at such a level that anybody can understand it. These theories and philosophies might be complex, and the topics are complex, but the way you describe it is simplistic, and you make it so everybody can read it and everybody can understand it and everybody can learn, which is awesome. Where can people find this book, Paul, and then also follow your work? And maybe John can follow up with that too.
So Amazon has the book. It's available there. Also, Mayo Clinic Publishing has its own site where it's available. And then a lot of what we talk about in the book is also available in our weekly columns, which are on the Mayo Clinic Platform website.
Excellent. Excellent.
And of course, Justin, since Paul and I write and speak every day, just use generative AI and I'm sure you'll find us.
Very, very true. And I also noticed there's the Library of Congress listing in the book as well. When I was going through it, how do you list it with the Library of Congress? How does that work? Or Paul, how do you guys know that? Do you know?
I think that's just a standard requirement for all books to go through to get a code that, and I believe every book has a Library of Congress code associated with it.
Very cool. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's always an honor and a pleasure to have you on air. And I look forward to your 8th book and talking about that in due time. So
Excellent.
congratulations
Well, thanks so much.
again.
We'll see you soon.
Always, my friend. And thank you to everybody for listening, and also for all of you that voted us 2024 Podcast of the Year. We are extremely grateful. Please tune into my shows and broadcasts weekdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific. As always, you can track me on LinkedIn at Justin T. Barnes, or track me on Twitter at HIT Advisor, and use the hashtag ThisJustinRadio so we can respond to your comments from the show. If you missed any of this episode or want to hear more, all my shows are posted at YouTube, Spotify, Apple iTunes, Amazon Music, Megaphone, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and TuneIn. And check out some of the new content we just published at justinbarnes.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.